course. Welcome back. Did anyone take advantage of the 15% promotion? Yeah. Nice. Cool. Next up, we have I'm sure what will be a fascinating conversation about the intersection of artificial intelligence and design. Your host for the segment is Carl Schmidt, the CTO and co-founder of Unbounce. Since its inception, Carl has been leading Unbounce's efforts to build scalable and reliable software in the cloud. He is currently heading up Unbounce's artificial intelligence strategy, which makes him perfectly placed to host this discussion. Please welcome Carl Schmidt.
How you guys doing? How's this has been incredible, right? The morning's been nice and inspiring and everything, right? Yeah. I know I've learned a lot. I learned way more about pot than I knew before, I can tell you that. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Artificial intelligence is something I'm really excited about these days, and so it's going to be so much fun to host this conversation. First, just a little bit about Unbounce, just to kind of put everything in context. So Unbounce, for those of you who might not know, we started out about 8 years ago. 6 co-founders, and we set out to make things easier for marketing and creative types to get marketing messaging out on the web, because this was one of the things that stood in the way of having really successful campaigns. And so we built a landing page builder, and we launched that. And the thing that excited me when we first got this going was I could imagine that, wow, we're going to be sitting in the middle of a ton of really interesting data. And one of the other things about us, we're bootstrapped, and we've grown the company now to 14,000 customers around the world. Thank you very much. I'm not trying to brag. The reason that that's significant, actually, is not just the number itself, but it's that we have that much data to draw on. And so within the last year and a half, we've started to do some interesting things with that data. We've started to build a data science team, and we've applied machine learning to that. And one of the first things that we discovered was the impact that language and words have on effective marketing communication. And of course, this is no surprise to copywriters who would be like, yeah, we knew that, right? But the thing that's really interesting about this is the extent to which it matters. As we started to build machine learning models, and of course, we want to take into account design and all of the things that go into effective marketing communication. But as we started to build these models, one of the ones that we built was to say, hey, we want to help our customers understand whether a page is going to have a good conversion rate or not. And because this is important, this tells them where they can focus their effort and things. And so we built a little model that could do this with 80% accuracy. It could tell you whether a page was going to be like above average or below average. And we thought, okay, 80%, that's pretty good. And so we played a little game at our conference back in June. We built it into a little mobile game just so that we could benchmark how our algorithm did, right? And so it turns out, long story short, we might talk about this a little bit more in the conversation, but long story short, the best marketer in the crowd got 57% versus our machine's 80%. And he came back, I talked to him afterwards, and he's like, man, I was trying to get inside the mind of your machine. I was trying to dig into all the design and where things were positioned and all the rest of it, and I was really taking my time with this. And he said, how does your machine do it? And I love dropping this on him. I said, look, it's only looking at words. That's it. It's not even looking at sentence structure, it's actually just looking at words. And so this, for us, was an incredibly fun insight, and it kind of demonstrated just the power that words have to influence conversion and activity. And so anyway, with that, I'd like to actually move on to our conversation. So I'd like to introduce Masha. So as the experienced designer at Element AI, Masha Krol is leading the industry towards AI-first design. Masha is applying over 8 years of product design expertise to the creation of symbiotic human-AI interactions. She previously led design crews at IBM and Kinaxis and co-founded Postcard to help people travel more and better. She aims to make a difference in the world through technology-enabled kindness and scalable empathy. Will you please welcome Masha Krol?
Carl? No.
So have a seat.
Yes, thank you.
Now, We're here for you guys. This is a fun conversation. And we had a bit of a warm-up last night at, it was Hambar, right?
Yeah.
And we thought, wow, this worked out so well. This warm-up conversation was so good. We needed to try to recreate as well as we could this experience for you guys. And so...
Andre.
There we go.
Why, thank you.
So we needed to have the appropriate inspiration at hand as we had this conversation. So, and we ended up really nerding out.
Yep.
Like we got very far
Yeah.
into consciousness and all kinds of
All
things.
sorts of stuff.
I'm not sure you guys can handle that.
I'm sure they
Yeah.
could. They
You
look
think
like,
so?
they look
I don't
like
know.
a fun bunch.
Can we really nerd out with you guys? Yeah? Can't we? I'm not hearing it. Oh, there it is. There it is. Oh,
there's
yay.
the nerd.
All right. Okay. So we'll hopefully get into a little bit of that. But there are some real takeaways that we want you to get from today's conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about how AI is going to change the world in ways that are really hard to imagine today. We're going to really dig into what AI first means and help you understand the intersection of artificial intelligence and design. And then especially as designers, we want to start to give you an idea of the kinds of things, the skills and techniques and areas of concern that you should start to be aware of. So with that, could we talk a little bit about what Element AI does? Because you guys are doing some really fun stuff.
Right, yeah. So Element AI, if you guys don't know, is a company here in town. We're actually now expanded into Toronto as well. That essentially what we do is we provide AI strategy and solutions for large corporates. And what that means is that we're enabling those companies with the AI talent, which is fairly scarce in the world, that we have built an incredible team around, that brain power, and methodologies to help them kind of disrupt themselves and think about AI-first ways to do their business.
Right, right. So let's just dig into it. Like, what is an AI-first world? How would you describe that? What does that even mean?
Yeah, so our fundamental belief at Element AI is that the world is moving towards becoming AI first. And the thinking there is that the products that are going to be successful moving forward are going to have AI at their heart from the start versus kind of, you can contrast it with an AI second approach, if you will, which is, tacking it on at the end or trying to kind of just add it on. But the thinking is that the relationship between kind of the human and the design experience as well as the AI becomes symbiotic. So as you were mentioning in my intro, this is one of the things that we're really drilling into. How do we make sure that the AI obviously learns from the human operators, but also what are all those influences that come back from the artificial intelligence models and how do they impact our lives and our experiences, and can we actually learn from them?
So, and now I talked a little bit about how I was going to throw some surprise questions
For
at
sure.
you. So we heard this morning about design first, of course.
Right.
And of course, there's mobile first. And now we're tossing out AI first. Like,
Right.
how do we reconcile all of these firsts? Like, not everything can be first.
Yes.
So where does AI sit in this?
Right. What are all these buzzwords?
Yeah, exactly.
So in our minds, this is a fundamental paradigm shift in the sense that we're enabling new problems to become solvable. So either problems that were previously intractable due to large data or just amounts that we couldn't process, or things that were like inherently too dangerous for humans to be able to solve, now we're able to solve. So to me, the idea of being AI first is actually just a way, it's like a tool in the toolbox to think about approaching problems and solving them. I don't believe that they replace in any way kind of mobile first design or being responsive from the start or those kinds of things. And especially not, I really want to emphasize this, and I don't think I mentioned this last night, when we talk about being AI first, we definitely do not mean human second, right? So from, yeah.
That's good to know.
You guys are good with that, right? But the thinking there is just that we believe in kind of the design thinking approach and doing all that kind of empathy work and problem discovery work up front, but then being able to solve problems by allowing the AI to kind of exist from the start, is what it is.
And so AI first embodies actually a lot, right? You talked about many pillars.
We stand
talked
on
about,
the, yeah, we stand on the shoulders of giants for sure. About
well,
all this stuff.
and not only that, but AI first is kind of a set of pillars around practices, right? And so there's security and safety and things like that, things that we need to be aware of as we're building these systems.
Right.
And design, as you imagine it in this AI first paradigm, is one of those pillars, right?
Yeah, so if you think about that AI first world I described, it's almost like a mindset, like an approach. So it's very broad and very kind of far-reaching. So we believe that there's going to need to be discussions around what does AI first ethics look like, what does AI first government look like. So just from my personal, but I'm by no means an expert in any of those areas, right? Just from my personal expertise and interest, the AI first design is the supporting pillar that we're really inaugurating.
Right.
But further to that point, we also understand that we might be able to define the kind of philosophical and kind of principle-based approach in that, but we also believe that we can't do this all on our own because we are not experts in every niche and industry and application. So what we're going to need to do as we drill down from the AI first design area, we're going to need people to contribute their own understanding of these principles and their own application of them in their focus areas. So when, as an example, when we were at Startup Fest and we were kind of chatting about AI first design there, one of the people that spoke to me was doing design and conversational interfaces. So she actually got inspired enough by our kind of ideas around this and principles. We were really humbled to find this out. She went and she created principles for AI first language design, which kind of encompasses all that like conversational chatbot stuff, but also copy, right? Which is really interesting too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the hope. We would love to provide, kind of start asking these questions from first principles and provide the platform, but have people be able to actually contribute the niche kind of.
Yeah, and so you've actually kind of put out a call to the industry to participate and to help develop the principles of AI first. What does that look like? So for folks in the room, if like, wow, yeah, I'm super excited about that, like how can they get involved? How can they kind of be part of the conversation? Yeah,
that's a great question. So currently we run a website called AIFirstDesign.com. That's a great start. Obviously, I know. Surprisingly, that's what it's called. So one of the things right now, the way to kind of contribute is through, we're also putting out kind of a series of blog posts on Medium around AI first design. So we're setting them up from kind of 5 fundamental questions around this. Like I mentioned, first principles, like we're really trying to get to the same page on these things. But the way to get involved now is to provide feedback. Shoot me an email at masha@elementai.com for sure. But also sign up to the mailing list on AI first design and AIFirstDesign.com and comment and react and reblog articles on Medium for sure. Cool. Okay. So along that vein, so when we talk about AI and design, one of the important distinctions for me when we were chatting last night was the notion of using AI to design and then designing for AI products. Right. And we had some really interesting discussions around using AI to design and where that could go, right? And so things like distilling input from conversations and things like that. And so if you wanted to just touch on that a little bit. Yeah, so, well, it's interesting, too. It got me thinking when you were describing the kind of Unbounce approach to AI and being able to predict whether a page is going to be higher or lower converting. One of the things that you could imagine happening is creating some of those variations through generative models, right, is something that AI could help us with, again, not in any way eliminating the human operator, but in fact just kind of helping do those menial tasks, right? So that's using AI to design landing page experiences. And so I would be really curious about that kind of application. But as practitioners, some of the things we do are, less fun than others. So when you do, when we do user research or we do user interviews, there's a lot of very manual tasks like transcription, at which humans are actually not very good, right? Because we suck at listening and we have to go back and we're slow and those kinds of things, right? But what we're really good at is figuring out the why. So if the machine learning models and the AI can do the transcription, can do the what, in a sense, then the symbiosis there becomes very clear in that the kind of user experience designer then can go in and figure out what that classification is, what those clusters are, what are the people actually saying, and then create experiences to further improve on that.
Yeah, for sure. And now, usually this is the point in the conversation where folks start to get freaked out for their jobs, right? And they're like, no, it always goes there. Everybody's like, oh man, so the machine's going to write copy, it's going to design stuff, it's going to distill stuff, and so it always lands there. But I think, the conversation we had, and certainly kind of with the trends we're seeing, is that very much in the creative areas and pursuits, these are some of the things that humans do especially well, and that I think machines are not going to touch for a very, very long time. I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I've seen some very beautiful output from AI, and you guys actually had a really good example of that, right? The art installation.
Right.
But I've not seen kind of raw creativity, and I don't think we expect to see that for a while.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of hype, and you'll see if you look at some of the videos that one of our co-founders, Yoshua Bengio, put out. He's really kind of pragmatic about where AI actually is in terms of capability, and it's kind of nowhere close where people are worried about it being, right? So machines are really, really good at very specific, very repetitive tasks, and so arguably being kind of an assistant in a creative endeavor is a much better fit today than being the actual creator. But yeah, one of the interesting kind of applications of this, and where you can start also the anxiety kind of creeping in maybe, but really like sort of unfounded, right?
Yeah.
We created a what we called Muraille, which was an installation for C2, which was a real-time style transfer installation where we trained a neural network to recognize and apply styles of Montreal street artists, which was really beautiful. And so you stand in front of it essentially, and it's taking video, and in real time kind of applying that style to the video feed. And if you guys Google, I think it's Element AI art, you might be able to see the Twitter feed of like the captures that people have done at various events. Because we did get a lot of really good feedback around that, and we ended up taking it kind of on a roadshow. Like we took it to Startup Fest, we took it to KDD afterwards as well. But it's just one kind of demonstration of AI in a creative context, which actually isn't necessarily particularly creative. Right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Wonderfully creative output, but it needed the creative input to actually do its job.
Absolutely.
Which, again, that's kind of the trend we're on for at least like 5 to 10 years.
Right.
10 years. Okay, so one of the biggest challenges of bringing these systems to reality, when systems are far more capable and they can do way more things, how do people trust them? And how do we design for trust? And what are some of the things as designers that we need to keep in mind as we introduce kind of machines and humans in this new little playground, where honestly the default in a lot of cases, and what we've experienced, is distrust, right? Because, well, look, it's a machine. Maybe it's going to steal my job. Maybe I just don't trust where it got its data, all of those things. So what are some of the things that you're thinking about in terms of AI first and building trust into the rollout of these products?
Right, and I mean, one of the examples that you gave was that marketer who was like, just tell me how did this happen, right?
Totally, yeah.
Because, and normally how do those decisions get made, right, in organizations? So it's usually either the loudest person
or the highest, the hippo, Have you guys heard this term, the hippo?
I've never heard it
the
before.
highest paid person's opinion?
I love that principle.
It's a thing. And actually, briefly, we for an April Fool's a few years ago, we did askahippo.com. We were completely, it was great. The funny thing is that people thought it was real. And because we said we were moving our business model to Hippo as a service, and you could ask anything. And so to this day, we're getting real questions.
Everything as a service.
Everything is a service, yes. So hippos too. But back to designing for trust and everything.
Right, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly.
Starting to feel it. So I think designing for trust is actually a really fundamental principle when we design anything, right? But with AI, it becomes incredibly more interesting when suggestions and potentially changes of behavior are being proposed by something that people perceive as, inanimate, potentially. Or worse, perceive as animate, and then it's just weird. But so one of the things,
basically,
right, jar. So one of the things that we know we need to be able to do is to be transparent in that discussion. So exactly like you kind of had that discussion with the marketer, then you said this is what we're looking at, right? We need to determine the right level of transparency in the algorithms to be able to sort of soothe or really just kind of create a collaboration between the human operator and the system. Now, the interesting thing is always these principles come with kind of the double-edged sword, right? Because you don't want to be so verbose that it's overwhelming. You don't want to drown your users in notifications or whatever else. So we need to make sure that we're kind of balancing that. And also, frankly, at times we won't know.
Yes.
Right? So we can say what some of the inputs are, and we can look at the output, but a lot of the times the sort of middle layers are very much opaque. So a lot of the times we won't necessarily know. So that's something that we need to make sure is kind of transparent and friendly and putting that forward to the user, right?
Well, and it's not too different from a human expert, right? I mean, there's lots of cases where we ask a human expert to make decisions and take action. And we're not going to sit there and go, okay, why exactly did you run with that creative in that particular campaign, right? We might, but you know, hopefully you're not like second guessing your creative leads like every single step of the way, because they're going to sit back and go, well, we had to take in the social context and you know, and they're going to provide you an explanation that's like you're going to hit stop very, very quickly. And so with AI systems, there's, I think, going to be this kind of acquaintance period where it's like, well, okay, well, let's see how this thing does and experiment a little bit. And so one of the things that we've recognized is that as we started to kind of talk to our customers about AI systems and everything, I think it was like the third conversation where we started to present concept diagrams and things. And that was the like very early on, the initial feedback was, well, I don't need a machine. I'm better at this. I can do better, right? And I think the way that we're looking at it is, well, okay, you maybe in some areas, but there's areas where machines can be better, and I think it's the kind of incumbent on all of us as we're bringing these systems out is to kind of just demonstrate that, oh wait, no, actually here's some areas where machines can be really, really great at things, free you up from some of the things that you don't really like to do as much, so that you can be a little bit more creative. And I think I'm hoping that in the context of talking about creativity, that what we'll see is that AI ultimately frees us up to be far more creative, because it does ultimately just kind of deal with some of the things that we'd rather not.
Exactly. And I think the other point is, if you can set up the systems to be open to discussion, like to have that flexibility, we have the opportunity to be sort of hyper personalized in these examples, right? We finally have the opportunity to really create that kind of, well, one-to-one marketing experience, or even in the product space, to be able to really dynamically set up environments for people to really thrive in and really optimize it for their particular usages. So if we don't establish that trust relationship, but also don't have mechanisms for people to have discussions and to allow the AI to learn from the human operators, then we're failing, right? So we need to be able to set up interfaces to do that.
Yeah, totally. So with any new technology, there's going to be pitfalls and advances. And one of the pitfalls that we talked about was this kind of default thinking, right? And cutting off avenues of exploration. So how many folks use Google Inbox? How many, can we have a show of, yeah. And how many people love the auto suggestions, the auto reply stuff, right? Like it's pretty useful, right? It's not perfect yet. It's not going to answer all the questions. But so what's one of the, I hadn't thought about this before, but you talked about one of the impacts of that kind of tool that being out there.
Right. So, and I think that's one example, and we can go through, potentially much less banal ones, but just because this one's used so frequently, what I always wonder when I see those automated responses that are just such nice defaults to click on, and they're so fast, and they're just there, and
they're so convenient, right?
And you're getting to inbox 0 because you're a hero. And so it's like, going through those things, though, it always made me wonder, what conversations aren't people having? Because those responses are in fact priming them to take the conversation tree into a particular direction or a particular set of directions. Like, what branches of the conversation are getting cut away? And so therefore, potentially reducing it to the lowest common denominator or whatever. And the same is true for things like filter bubbles that we've seen with social news feeds, where people just reinforce and accelerate that bias. So I think that's something as designers we really need to take responsibility for. I've noticed that there's sometimes there's attack in the design world, sort of in some of the articles that have been published, where people talk about kind of blaming the dirty algorithm or like beating it back with a stick, and we should, they're too arrogant, those algorithms. The AI systems don't have intent.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that we design them, right, to be nice. We design them to be to do the things that we design them to do, and if they have unexpected kind of system effects and those back kind of arrow impacts on users and communities and humans, then we as designers need to take responsibility for that and think through those systems. And this is where I think our hypothesis anyway is that some of those kind of design frameworks and principles fail because there is this adaptability. And so we need to create kind of new frameworks for thinking about that, because when you did your sort of super empathized stage, the world was different because your system wasn't in it. And now that your system is in it and continuously changing and learning, it's almost like playing catch up, right?
Yeah,
so how do you design for that is the question.
Would the yet comment have triggered a Skynet jar offense?
Yeah, that's it. So I was telling Carl last night that at the office, because there is such anxiety around this, and I think obviously media is taking advantage of the popular sci-fi kind of concepts of, Skynet and Jarvis and whatever, this sort of dystopian worldview. We actually have a jar. I don't know if you guys watched The New Girl ever. They had like the douchebag jar when somebody made a douchey comment. People were like, jar! And so you had to put money in the douchebag jar. So we have a Skynet jar. If you make a comment around like, well, the robots are gonna take over, that's jar. I feel like that was it. That was on the line.
It was borderline? Okay, all right. And so this is tough. I mean, as you're trying to raise the level of conversation with your customers and folks that you're working with out there, it's hard to first get them to think outside the box a little bit, right? So, you mean we don't have to have an explicit interface around this. The machine can do more of the hard work. Okay, that's interesting. And then they very quickly jump to like, well, can we have like a fully VR anthropomorphic, wizard that just like solves everything for you? Like,
I hope it's an actual wizard. In a wizard hat.
Well, it could be.
Roman wizard.
So you just did it, right? It's like you immediately want to go there.
It. Yeah.
So how do you start to have that conversation with folks? How do you get them to open up the bottle, but then put them in a sandbox, as it were?
Yeah. So the approach that we know we need to take, because there is such interest around AI, but also such disparate levels of knowledge, right, and maturity around readiness for AI. We know that we need to take the organizations that we work with on sort of a roadmap development kind of approach, where we really want to start by thinking, okay, what are the areas of your business where AI could be the most impactful, right, and progress toward that, but then we need to bring them back and tell them, look, this is, in order to bring you value immediately, and in order for us to validate, frankly, our existence, right, we need to be able to show value immediately in a very constrained way that they're able to see. So I think to me, it's that connection, that roadmap that really makes the difference, because you can open up the future, and you should, right? You should be looking at how are you going to get disrupted? Are you going to be able to do it to yourself, in a sense, right? But then you need to bring it back and say, okay, tactically, in order to get there, here are the things that I can do, in fact, today.
Yeah. So I want to do one more thing, and then hopefully we can take a couple questions. So think of a couple good questions out there. Really did want to touch on kind of the fundamental principles, the toolbox of AI and design and AI-first design. So, the last probably 20 years of interactive work has been like largely visual.
Right.
And so now we've got fun new mediums to work in. There's a lot more audio interaction happening with things like Siri and Alexa and Google Home and things like that. VR and AR is going to be an incredibly important part of this. So what are some of the things that as designers we need to think about in terms of kind of expanding our skill set and things like that?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question because as a company, our bread and butter is in AI as a service, which is essentially delivering an API, right? So from a designer standpoint, it's like, okay, cool. But really, in order to, a person or a business user cannot consume an API. So in order for us to be able to demonstrate value, we need to design experiences that optimize the usage of that API then and create optimal experiences, symbiotic experiences for people. But so I'll touch on one of the principles. We actually created a card deck just for kind of ideation purposes to think about kind of AI first design. So if you guys sign up on the website, I'll send you the PDF if you're curious. But I should have brought some with me today. But so one of the principles that we think about is designing for delight. Because again, we have the opportunity now to do that and in a very scalable way. Delight has been a measure of user experience for as long as user experience has been around. But as an example, how do you think of your system as kind of the MVP, the player, most valuable player, not to be confused with minimum viable product, same acronym. But how do you actually design your system to go above and beyond, right? What's available? So one example is there's an app called AnyDo, and it's a to-do list app, which is kind of terribly boring in a sense, right? But one of the things it does is not only does you can keep your to-do list in it, but it actually takes the step further to start doing some of the items on your to-do list. So as an example, if you put something like, send flowers to mom for birthday or something, it actually suggests, hey, do you want me to just order from 1-800-flowers.com and send it? Because I know,
because you're going to forget if you don't do it.
First of all, you're going to forget. But secondly, I know, because of the context that I have on you and your mother, that I know where to go and how to send them, and I have the payment method, right? So, but that's thinking of the system as designing for delight and being going a step beyond, above and beyond. And I feel that the concept, the principle, again, what we're trying to do is make that be applicable across domains and applications. So theoretically, you can think about that in the context of AR, VR, right? Any kind of voice recognition and assistance and those kinds of things. So we really want to stay on that kind of more conceptual level and have really experts in those systems contribute the really base level niche principles. Cool.
Okay, so I think Andre's got a microphone out here somewhere. The asking from the audience, apparently that wasn't working for the live stream so well. Let's see, I think I saw a hand shoot up right in the center there towards the back. There we go, that was the first one. Go easy on us.
Sure.
Be nice.
It's okay, I've got.
Yeah, okay, all right. Now bring it.
Okay.
Bring it.
Is it on? I don't think it's on. I can shout.
Oh, we tried.
Yeah, we did.
Is it good? Is it on? Is there a...
Hello? Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
Yay.
Awesome. So thank you so much. That was a brilliant Q&A. So as designers, usually we learn a lot by inspiration or borrowing and stealing. So you see, we'll see a interaction pattern in Inbox, and we'll apply it to a customer support CRM platform or something, right?
Totally.
But when you see AI models, you see them being trained on siloed data sets because the companies don't want to share, their data sets or put it out in the open. So do you see that as a limitation, or do you see somehow being a bridge to, a way to bridge the gap?
So at Element AI, our hypothesis is that we actually set up our partnerships in a way that we can reuse data across the board, because our reality is that transferred learning is where we believe we're going to win. So that last mile customization is really what we want to do. But in terms of creating those common models, we really want to make sure that we're training on non-silo data to prevent that from happening. But I definitely see where you're coming from, and I can see that also being very much a barrier to entry to new players, right? Which is why we're working with large companies that have all this data internally already, and we bring the talent to be able to do stuff with it.
Yeah,
right.
Cool. That was a great question. So I've gotten the signal that I should actually wrap it up because we're very interested in keeping the afternoon on time. So thank you. That was actually a really good question, and I hope you've enjoyed the conversation as much as we have.
This
Cheers.
was fun. Cheers.
And thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.